They want to hear from you. So as you have your conversations and you learn things from the people who are going to speak, jot your questions down and be sure to ask your questions. This is a very critical time in our history, and it's important that we get our questions asked. I didn't say that I am Reverend Susan Smith. I was a tri-chair of the Poor People's Campaign back in 2018, when we had the 40 days of action. Was that the right year? 2018. And so we worked, we worked, but it was very successful. It was invigorating, and it was just kind of a milestone. But then, you know, after such a campaign, you have a lot of work to do. And I know in Columbus, there was kind of a lapse after we did all that because everybody was tired out. Well, we don't have a whole lot of time to be tired anymore because there's too many things on the line.
So just to give a little bit of information on what we do with the Ohio Poor People's Campaign, we operate from the same set of value principles as the national team. And we come together as a moral fusion. How we build a moral fusion movement. We gather people from all over the state and from different communities around the 5 systemic interlocking evils of systemic poverty, systemic racism, ecological devastation, militarism, the war economy, and the distorted moral narrative. How we shift the narrative is by shifting the false narrative, building power, impacting in policies, elections and policies. And how we do that is by shifting the narrative, refuting the false and limited definition of poverty, talking about the critical issues that get little attention in our national discourse, such as our lack of healthcare, clean water, living wages, voting rights, and more. We also want to shift the narrative by changing the narrator, by insisting that those most impacted speak for themselves and are part of the leadership of this campaign. We also want to shift the narrative by drawing connections between the 5 issues of the campaign. Once again, systemic racism, systemic poverty, ecological devastation, militarism, the war economy, and the distorted moral narrative. We also want to build power, organizing, mobilizing, base building, and outreach. One band, one sound, same message coming from everywhere, but adjusted to each community and voices of each community being heard. We identify and consolidate emerging leaders and deepening their clarity, commitment, capacity, and connectedness to build the campaign. We're bringing people together to fight for a common agenda, inspiring communities to stay engaged for the long haul. We know that this is a long haul battle. We know that all the issues that we face are not quickly solved. We know that this is something that we all have to stand together, and we are definitely in it for the long haul. We also want to impact elections and policies. This is about the demands of the campaign that will help to guide our work around policies in our state house. Registering people for the movement who will vote. Needed for the poor and moral agents of change to determine the issues, not those in power. We need to hear from those who are directly impacted. We want them to set the agenda. Using a moral frame to emphasize what matters and what is right and wrong in our current society. We must have the issues that are affecting millions of people at the center of any political agenda or debate. Help us do more. That would be the next slide, Joan. Help us do more. Help us do more as far as political education, mobilize, organize, register, and educate people for the movement who will vote. Help us with outreach. We need help mobilizing and organizing local communities. cultural arts, building a cultural arts team that is educated on the 5 systemic evils, create art and practice music for the movement, social media and website design, help us design and maintain a website for the OHPPC, fundraising, help fundraising to provide for participation in events. These are just some of the ways that you can become involved with the Ohio Poor People's Campaign. And finally, if you'd like to follow us, you can reach out to us at the national PPC level. You can follow us on Facebook at the Ohio PPC Facebook page. Our email address is also listed, ohio@poorpeoplescampaign.org. And you can follow us on Twitter at Ohio PPC. We would certainly love for you all to become involved. And the reason why we would like everyone to become involved is because of the current state of Ohio. The current state of Ohio. Currently in Ohio, we are battling against Republican extremism and corruption. Everything from the HB6 scandal, the biggest government scandal in Ohio history, to the current debacle of our redistricting process. The headline this past week from Cleveland.com reads, as congressional redistricting deadline looms, Ohio Senate Republicans head to sunny Florida for a top dollar fundraiser. Even if the redistricting process were suddenly to become constitutional, Ohioans still have to fight the Ohio legislature over a whole host of extreme bills. One of the bills is Bill HB 387, and this attacks our right to vote. This bill would require all voters to register to vote in person, eliminate no excuse absentee voting, limit the forms of acceptable photo ID, shorten the state's early voting period, and ban mail ballots returned via Dropbox from being counted, among other horrible provisions. Currently, Ohio voters can present any form of government-issued documentation that meets various requirements, such as including their photo and address. Under HB 387, only 3 forms of identification would be accepted: an Ohio driver's license, an ID, an Ohio driver's license or ID, military ID, or US passport. In HB 294, it would create an online absentee ballot request system that requires 2 forms of identification. It would allow secure ballot drop boxes only at county boards of elections, only 3 on the property of each board of election, but only for 10 days prior to election. Right now, they're available during the 28-day early voting period. If these bills were passed, it will take Ohio backwards in voting. On top of our voting rights in Ohio being under attack, we're also facing attacks on our education systems in Ohio with bills like HB 322 and HB 327, which would create an environment of fear in our schools, preventing Ohio students from receiving an honest and accurate education. You may have noticed these attacks against honesty in education, rooted in scare tactics and lies about critical race theory. These attacks are being waged by ideological culture warriors like the American Legislative Exchange Council, or ALEC for short, and the Heritage Foundation. This is the latest in their long campaign to delegitimize, defund, and privatize local public schools. And now they've convinced Ohio legislators to take action on a non-existent problem. The supermajority extremists are passing bills nobody wants. The Ohio passed HB 227. This bill is in regards to concealed carried weapons, carrying without a license, permitless carrying of a gun, which really means no training. Under the current law, Ohioans must complete 8 hours of training and pass a background check via their local sheriff for a 5-year concealed carry license. This legislation would remove that requirement. And what about HB 99? Arming our teachers without any training. Legislation to allow Ohio teachers and other school personnel to carry firearms on grounds of the school without prior peace officer training or experience shot. And that brings me to Ohio's anti-riots or anti-protest bills. 4 bills introduced early from Ohio's 134th General Assembly. Supporters of the 4 bills, HB 22, HB 109, SB 16, and SB 41. They say these changes are necessary to protect first responders and peaceful protests from the lawlessness of the summer demonstrations in 2020. We know, however, these bills are photocopies of bills from other states, and their true purpose is to intimidate people across Ohio who protest controversial issues like police misconduct. The problem with these bills, especially HB 109, is that the language is very vague and left up to interpretation. Take, for instance, this language in HB 109. It expands the corrupt activity laws to encompass organizing persons to commit riot or aggravated riot, knowingly providing materials of support or resources for person to commit aggravated riot or to commit riot or aggravated riot. Any organization that knowingly provided material support resources, that would be considered corrupt activity, to the responsible party, and that knowingly directed, authorized, facilitated, or encouraged the reasonable party to commit the prohibited act. The bill also imposes liability up to 3 times the amount of damage on an organization that knowingly provides material support or resources. Now, this organization does not include an entity organized as or by a governmental agency for the execution of a governmental program. The penalties for these are the same as for violent and physically threatening crimes, such as domestic violence, menacing by stalking, assault, and battery. Those are just a few of the extreme bills that the supermajority Republican legislature has introduced and in some cases passed in Ohio. But do these bills really reflect Ohioans? We know that citizens participating in free speech and peaceful assembly are the sign of a healthy democracy. It is undemocratic for elected officials to pass laws that silence their own constituents. We should be encouraging greater participation in our democracy, not less. And that's what we do at the Ohio Poor People's Campaign. We encourage greater participation in our democracy by coming together to listen to the people and hear their community issues, and by mobilizing, organizing, registering people to vote, and empowering people so their voices can be heard. Now, with all of these crazy bills that we have in Ohio, we also have some victories that we'd like to talk about. Through all of these, we're in this for the long haul, like we say, and we slowly pluck away at this work, and we all achieve small goals along the way. So right now, I'd like to introduce a couple of our coordinating committee members and let you listen to the stories about issues and help us celebrate their victories. I would first like to introduce Robin Brown. Take it away, Robin.
Hi, everybody, and welcome again to Ohio Poor People Campaign meeting today. I would like to share a couple of things that we have been doing as a grassroots organization in Cleveland, Ohio. The work of the Ohio Poor People Campaign, as you heard Julie talking about, is working together throughout our region as we also work on things in our community and the national level as well. By doing this, we are bringing solutions to our problems instead of just talking about the problems we are faced with. I have been a parent of a lead-poisoned child and an advocate for over 23 years, starting a grassroots organization in 2005, bringing awareness of education along with awareness with the voice of the afflicted to the table of decision-making of this ecological devastation of lead poisoning in greater Cleveland area. We have reached out to over 178,000 people, educating them and bringing that awareness necessary for them to be able to do things for their children, opposed to waiting on others. We also were able to collaborate with the Lead Safe Coalition and bring over $1 million to the Lead Safe Coalition for the rental property being certified as lead safe. This will allow the homeowners to help with their rental properties through a loan or grant. It is also being open to actual residents that are homeowners and don't rent their homes. And they are moving into the child care arena as well. We're trying to make all of the homes safe from lead poisoning in 5 years in this collaboration. And me being part of the Ohio Poor People Campaign is allowing this to come into the environmental justice arena as a selected topic of an environmental issue. Also working with a collaborated group, we started participatory budgeting. And with that participatory budgeting, over 50 organizations came together to ask for democracy change so that the voice of the people could be heard and the ideas of what they feel is good in their neighborhood could have a fund. So we went to the city of Cleveland mayor, as well as the candidate that is now our new mayor, asking for $30.8 million. And that represents the poor people percentage in Cleveland, Ohio. And we were actually given that money through endorsement of the mayor. We have not gotten it in our hands, but he have made an announcement that it will be happening within his first 100 days. So through working together and collaborating together, yes, our issues are hard and they are affecting us, but it's going to take our voices, us coming together, us working together to bring the solutions, because if we don't do that, we're going to be devastated. And whose fault is that? And it's not for now, and it's not for us, it's for generations to come. Thank you, and I would like to bring on Larry, my co-partner.
I'm going to take it back a little bit. I'm going to speak very briefly, but take it back a little bit. In terms of the Ohio Poor People's Campaign, when we began forming in the fall of 2017, and we really kind of announced ourselves very, very broadly to the country and to this, and particularly to Ohio, in 6 days, in 6 weeks of action that happened in May and June of 2018. We had hundreds of people that came down to Columbus over those 6 weeks, which happened every Monday. And in each week we did a different theme at the time, talking about what was the issues and the priorities that we had, and in each of those areas. And as part of that, we did very much direct action, including civil disobedience, where many of us were arrested. And it was a way of really announcing and stating out as a Poor People's Campaign in Ohio what we're all about, what we're committed to, and we got a lot of publicity, and it really kind of set the stage as we were moving forward. And we've continued to do that on a statewide basis. From Ohio's perspective, we brought a lot of people down to Washington, D.C., to West Virginia, to other places, and have been really one of these states that's been very much at the forefront of having a lot of activity across in actions, not just in Ohio, but across the country. And as an example, just in Ohio, in terms of some of the things we've been very involved with, Julie mentioned earlier around the horrible anti-protest bills that we've had. And the Poor People's Campaign, the Ohio Poor People's Campaign, has been very active as a participant, along with many other groups in different parts of the state. We kind of announced our actions against it on a day of protest where we had them across the state. And up to that point, there had been no publicity about all this, and we all of a sudden announced the dangers of it. At the same time, we did active work with legislators and others. And the first bill, which was a bill called SB 16, which would have made it a felony to do any kind of civil disobedience, along with a lot of other horrible things. Through many of our actions, through the campaign, working with other groups, we were able to dilute that bill so much that that when it eventually passed, it really had no teeth left in it, not a lot that we had problems with. There's still several other bills that are bad, but up to this point, we've been, for example, been able to, as I say, was doing civil disobedience in some of the other bills is supposed to be a felony. We've had that removed. We've gotten able to bring that down as a misdemeanor. There were efforts that would make it illegal. And it's still a problem, but make it blatantly illegal to videotape where somebody's being arrested. That's been removed. There's been other things that we've been able to do. We have a long way to go in this, but our voices have been heard. We need to continue to be involved, and this is one way which the Poor People's Campaign has been and can continue to be an effective advocate working with others across the state.
Poor People's Campaign was trying to make sure that people had a decent standard of living no matter where they were in this country.
We have a dream of creating a new world.
Martin is not getting up out of the grave. We must be the runner in front that reaches back.
I'm joining the Poor People's Campaign to say our people are suffering and we will not take it anymore. Are you with me, my people?
We have to deal with our war economy and systemic racism and systemic poverty and ecological devastation.
No one should have to bury their child in America because they don't have health care insurance.
So I was increasingly compelled to see the war as an enemy of the poor.
It was one thing to know that you didn't have water and you couldn't afford your water. It's a whole nother to find out that they shut off your entire community and none of you matter.
People who are hurting the most have linked up to say, we won't be silent anymore.
That breaking news in Albany, where a large group of protesters have moved into the street.
Washington Avenue between City Hall and Lark Street closed down.
Protesters with the Poor People's Campaign of Indiana.
Here in Ohio, we're taking action too, supporting each other, demanding legislation, and working toward equality. Join the Ohio Poor People's Campaign. Help us to create a just world.
Here. Okay, so how many groups do we have?
6.
Okay, the first group number 1, whichever group, breakout room, if you were in breakout room number 1, let's hear from you.
We had a really robust conversation regarding the political landscape as well as what critical issues. Mostly, I think we dwelled on the critical issues, on the fact that our legislation does not represent the people's voices. Those legislators who do try seem to not get the support they need, and this impacts communities and individuals, especially where systematic poverty is concerned. COVID seems to illuminate this, especially in terms of when Senator Schaefer tried to pass SB 17 to narrow down qualifications for food stamps, healthcare, Medicaid, all the safety net programs. There were also environmental concerns, especially in Nelsonville with clean water, with boil orders weekly, and family members living without water or electricity. They have issues with addictions as well as homelessness in that area. Mark talked about the need for housing to move from temporary to permanent housing, and that's a big challenge according to Colette. So affordable housing is an issue. Let's see. The other things are any of our legislators really representing our voices, and how can we change out our legislators? Colette mentioned voter education. Mark mentioned redistricting made into a democratizing process. And I'm sorry, I was a little callous about the need that legislators seem to be a pay-to-play process right now. And Russ talked about the need for lots of good investigative reporting to hold our legislators responsible and accountable.
Great, thank you, thank you. Let's have group number 4.
Group number 4, we agreed that the current political landscape really makes our work a lot more difficult because it really overfills our plate with issues that we have to deal with. And we took a look at all of the horrible bills that Julie mentioned in her opening statement, on voter suppression, on gun rights, and plus others that we know about, the anti-democracy bills on protest, and the anti-environmental bills and everything else that goes along with it. And a lot of that is because they seem to think that they can do whatever they want because of their supermajority. And the redistricting that's going on in Ohio right now is really critical to making a change in that. So we thought we really need to get in touch with the redistricting commission members and just bombard them with demands that they do it correctly. So I put in the chat a link to the members of the redistricting commission. And one of the things we found out is if you try to contact them, the best way to do it is by phone, and that because that ties up office staff and that ties up their voicemail and fills it up. But if you can't, if their voicemail is so filled up that you can't even get that to work, then you want to go to email. But you don't want to use the email that's on their Ohio, House webpage or Ohio Senate webpage. You want to use the one that goes directly to them. And the way you do that is you put rep, R-E-P, then the district number at ohiohouse.gov, or you can do send district number at ohiosenate.gov. So I use Mike Skindle as an example because he's the one that gave me this tip. He is from District 13. So to contact him directly, I would write rep 13 at ohiohouse.gov. This is all in the chat. And so you guys can take a look there and you can get that information there. But we also looked at that. So what we need to do is we need to mobilize voters, and we need to find common values and change our language and be able to listen to others with different political beliefs. We've got to get the dark money and fear out of politics, and and understand that sensationalism does get people's attention, and they will, for some reason, people want to believe the worst about all of us and that type of thing. So that is what we talked about.
Great, thank you, Debbie. Group number 3.
I think that was my group. Yeah, so a lot of themes that have already been brought out, we talked about, but the current political landscape is more like a forest fire, and that's very polarized, of course. And we just talked about, one example in my mind was how school boards are being fighting grounds for culture wars, and that there's very clearly violent policies to bankrupt the school board and then bring in their opponents to the school board's policy. Our response to that was we needed to work on just trying to take away the threats of fear and xenophobia and try to respond in reasoned ways and get to the bottom of stories, vet every candidate to the fullest. And then, of course, registration. Voter registration is key to getting people to change what's going on. Yeah, I think that was pretty much. And then just the general corruption. I think we already mentioned it, but just it's just kind of, it's almost becoming a norm that there's corruption in our governmental system. So.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for that. Yes, it's killing. I thought the other day that it's very interesting to feel like the mafia is running the country and the states. Just my own little bias, but anyway. Group number 2. Thank you. Group number 3. Group number 2.
Group number 2. I'm not sure what our number was. I was going to report for either 1 or 2. I was with Larry Bresler and Monica, and
we were 6. We were group 6.
Oh, we can do group 6 then. That's fine. Let's do group number 6.
Hi, I'm Don, and Monica will fill in if she agreed if I miss anything here. But we were talking about some of the issues that have been victorious in Northeast Ohio. Just on the fringe of the Poor People's Campaign are the Jail Coalition with bail reform. And another victory would be issue 24, which gave more accountability around the police department issues of brutality. White supremacy is being maintained through the voter suppression. So that's a major important issue that we want to consider. And of course, redistricting is along with that. We didn't mention environmental racism, but it certainly popped up when I heard someone else talk about environmentalism because of the lead and mold issues in Cleveland, especially in some of the Section 8 housing. The mold issue is terrible. So the powers that be have moved to marginalize BIPOC and poor communities with the laws around redistricting, anti-protest laws, relaxing the gun laws, sexual preference laws. And Mary asked why, and we never got to answer it, but in my head I said, well, it's to save white supremacy. And the white state supremacy is a term I started to use. Now, Brian said our secret weapon is our relationships and the tactics that are used to divide us. We must, repel or respond to. So they want to divide and conquer, the powers that be, but we need to unite and empower. And of course, that comes into voter, the voter count was really low, 20% and whatnot in Cleveland and the surrounding areas, the voter turnout, that is. But Brian cautioned us, when we go into some of the communities, don't act like a savior. We must be humble, have an air of humility, and be mindful of that. We'd love to empower folks, but, we're not the savior. So we don't just talk about it, do it. Ask how we can help in some fashions, too. And finally, let's see, how do we fight white supremacy? Through showing our true selves, connecting and love. That's how we fight it. Finally, let's see. We had an idea about statewide coalescing with the Poor People's Campaign. These county fairs are coming up. If COVID lifts and we can attend, let's get a table at the booth, have a booth, serve some ethnic food, hummus and soul food, and pass out our literature and talk to people about the issues. So any case, and Brian finished off with a certain segment of the society will be there if the community is there. So if we can empower our communities, then we'll bring other folks along. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Don. Okay, group number 2.
I can speak for group number 2.
Okay.
We were talking about, of course, all the bills that are going on right now in Ohio, and how the voting bills will have a negative effect. Limiting the ability to vote will hurt us badly. The elderly need to vote by mail. And one of the things suggested is the Ohio Poor People's Campaign helping people get to the polls, maybe by offering rides, organizing carpools, things like that, making sure our community is out and voting and registering people who vote, getting out there and making sure that everybody's voice can be heard. Also, redistricting can hurt the census results because people don't have faith in the systems anymore. That was another thing we discussed is, folks don't want to fill out the census. They feel like it's going to hurt their community. It's going to hurt everything. And it was mentioned that the census data could be affected by that because people just don't trust the government anymore. Somebody else mentioned how they were concerned about the gun laws, making society more violent. We have to continue to call our senators and express our no compliance with these bills. We have to continue to keep raising our voices and to keep letting them know that we just do not agree with these bills. Having a place, when we did start to talk about some of the environmental issues that we have, we know the supermajority, this is a gas and oil state, that there's no regulation in the gas and oil facilities and everything that's going on in our land, not to mention the other ecological devastation of lead. And having a place where those affected by lead can go and learn about lead and learn how to heal and how to prevent and correct it and learn how to fight for themselves instead of others fighting for them, learning how to lift their own voices. And in the movement overall, it was stated to make sure that impacted people can be heard and to have us help us lift up their voices so that they can be heard.
Yay, thank you. That was excellent. You guys got a lot in at that 30 minutes. That's good. Group number one.
Yeah, that was us. And some of what I've heard so far, we also talked about, we started off talking about voting, but then moved into, I guess, other key issues. Those included, because we think we're going to talk about voting in the next breakout. Other issues talked about the child tax credit and the need to make that permanent. Food deserts, the fact that like some places are being advertised as passing out food, but then you show up and they're not. We also talked about school boards as a grounds for basically a well-organized coup. I guess this sort of goes back to what we're, the atmosphere we're working in, and there is a very well-organized opposition that people don't understand how organized they are, how long they've been organized, like the past 40 years, basically, that this is, that there's a group, there's a sector in our society that's been working on this. And so they are working on things like defunding public education. And we talked about how we need to use that language because they're trying to scare people with the language of defund the police. In actuality, they're trying to defund the post office, public education, other social programs that help people in society, and that people, there's a lack of information about that and understanding that. We talked a lot about lead poisoning and how people don't even have the information to even know that they're being lead poisoned, but that 4 out of 6 kids today are, subject to lead poisoning, and you don't see the effects for 20 years, but that feeds into all sorts of other disparities and inequalities. We also talked about environmental justice and climate action as a way to address a lot of these issues. For example, there's strong action in the city of Columbus to have a strong 100% renewable energy program that has grants for low-income neighborhoods and job training and providing jobs that in the renewable energy sector that target people in the opportunity neighborhoods. And so those kinds of things, and we also asked about lead in there as well. So these environmental and sustainability plans can be used as a grounds to put in place the solutions that we need to a lot of these issues. And we basically, kind of concluded by saying that this opposition, they're kind of counting on us becoming despondent, giving up, giving into doomerism, and not understanding that that's an organized opposition and that we can get organized as well. And, we can fight back and organize and take them off their game. So I guess that's a summary of group one.
Good job, Kathy. Good job, everybody. As we're getting ready to go into our break, I just keep remembering that organized people are stronger than organized money. And it's a message that we have to internalize ourselves and then share with people, because people are fighting being depressed and pessimistic. So anyway, we're going to break right now. Again, thank you. That was good stuff. You got a lot of stuff in that 30 minutes. We appreciate it. We're going to break now and we'll come back into session at 4:45.
Yeah, we talked about ways to increase voter participation and enthusiasm. And one of the ways we talked about that was just recruiting them to the Ohio Poor People's Campaign as more of like a family than just a political organization, in order to increase their feeling of belonging and to increase their motivation to try to get involved in changing things in the world. So, I'm not sure what it would be. Almost like a peer-to-peer support was one word that someone mentioned, and also almost like a sponsorship of someone who came into the Poor People's Campaign. And then also we really love the idea of going out and say that Don Larson's fairground idea, just going to county fairgrounds and just bringing good food and just attracting people to the Poor People's Campaign that way, but make it more personal, not so much impersonal.
Great. Thank you. Group number 2.
Oh, I'm sorry. And we also talked about like a welcoming committee of some sort for when new members come in. They have a next stage to jump to a platform where there's people that's there to help them navigate the space until they get familiar with it.
Okay, you are tail ending group number 1.
Peter, I'm with Peter.
One.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Okay, group number 2.
We talked about setting up Zoom clubs and meeting with representatives. We want to make sure that we can get in contact with our younger people and meet with students on college campuses. We could also go to coffee houses, coffee shops, get out flyers, really use social media also to reach different groups using Twitter and Facebook, and coming up with a list of bullet points so that everyone that goes to those sites can see what has been accomplished. We talked about utilizing toolkits and working to make sure that those we come in contact with, that we first of all find out what's important to them, and then also be able to share with them ways that their needs can be addressed, and letting them know and understand that voting really is personal, so that we know what's personal for them, so they will in turn vote, so that our goals as a collective will be accomplished. And one other thing, just making sure that we're utilizing our different regional groups so that we can continue to strategize locally.
Great, thank you, Wanda. Group number 3.
Okay, group number 3. We were discussing how we should stay on top of our elected officials, specifically Frank LaRose, and not leave him any breathing room. Be polite about it, but not leaving any breathing room, and let him know on a regular basis via social media, via mail, that he's being watched. We need to contact our elected officials, more often. As Debbie put it, we want to be a burr on their butt. Anyway, we need to figure out a way how to expand voting by mail so that not only is it easier, but it's made more accessible for our seniors, for the elderly, for the handicapped, and people who cannot make it to the polls on that one individual day. We also thought about figuring out a way for bringing voting online forward as well, contacting college campuses and their political affiliated parties and groups, as well as high schools, to make sure that we make sure everybody is registered and organized with other voting groups. The last election, like the 2016 election, all the various groups within the city of Cincinnati, we had a meeting, we got together, because otherwise we were hitting one neighborhood and a week later somebody else was hitting that same neighborhood. And we divided the city so that we were doing everybody's work together. We took this neighborhood, they took the next neighborhood, we actually put it out so that every social action group was responsible for one region in the city. So that way we weren't duplicating effort and work. Kathy had suggested Columbus Stand Up. They got very organized in getting people to the polls and making sure that people had transportation. And they pivoted that during the pandemic and used that same system to get people to vaccination sites if they didn't have any means to get out or lived close to a vaccination site, which I think is really good. Highlighted Toledo has a program that also brings Ryder to the polls. And Kathy also recommended that we get the Democrats to remind them that they made promises, and all elected officials who make promises need to be held accountable for not following through. Anyway, we also talked about helping people run for smaller offices, so that we change the narrative on school boards and city councils, and we stop the hijacking basically of all the small councils and so on as they are trying to do. We also suggested that it might be possible to find out if we have access to legal teams, because people are going to be challenged much more when they do go to vote, so that there's somebody there with legal authority or who can repeat the law to the people, so that when you're being harassed, you're able to vote properly and not be challenged at that point. Anyway, just basically be ready to harass our elected officials as well, but do so in a polite manner. And that's the end of group 3.
That's good. I like be ready to harass. I like that. Group number 4.
Okay, I'll take 4. So basically, I think the theme of hearing it in the other groups, and I'll use one of the group's terms, was make it personal. And we need to look at what was successful in this last election. We were successful with the low income voters. So really, finding out why, and some of the reason we think are, we not just the Poor People's Campaign, but other groups like the Poor People's Campaign, texted hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, and just were relentless and just, getting the word out about it, and finding out, what's already working in the communities. We have strategies in the urban communities. We also need to find out the strategies in the rural communities, and saying what's already working in those communities, not just what's wrong, but what's working, and tapping into those systems, and connecting with those people, and whatever we do, making sure that people from those communities are represented, so that we're not going in as this foreign entity and coming in, and that those people know that we have been successful. Like yes, you're disenfranchised, but we have been successful when we do come together, we do. So look at and having those things ready to share with people so that they understand that we have been successful. And some of the ideas were, going to places, especially in the rural areas that everybody's so spread out, go to the places where everybody comes, like the grocery stores, the libraries, the, places, and setting up there and doing it now, not just at the election time. We have to start building those relationships now. Ideas like going to museums, free museums where people show up at museums, go to the places where people are already going instead of making them come to us. Let's see. Ideas of like going to CMHA housing and holding events there where people already are, and like having a cookout or having, registered to vote events there. Trying to think what else. Recruit, and that same thing of piggybacking with other organizations, who's already established, who's already doing the work, and find out how we can uplift and what's the word I'm looking for, like make whatever they're doing even better. And so we're again working smarter, not harder. Anything else I missed before?
Thank you, Mary.
I didn't hear you, Larry. I think Larry tried to say something to add on. You didn't unmute, Larry.
No, I just said you did a great job. That's all.
Thank you. Group 5.
I think that's us. We talked a lot about the same things that already mentioned. We looked at it in two distinct parts, though, by my way of understanding. Systemic things that can be done, and the overall broad view of the picture. Just so you know, Waking the Sleeping Giant is the report that the Poor People's Campaign National Call for Moral Revival did on the 2020 election that identifies 15 different states that as little as 1.5% of people had come out to vote would have radically changed the course of that election. So when we start about that, for us here in Ohio, we have way too little voter turnout. So we discussed how we get some systemic things and how we get voter turnout. And we also talked about why we have such low voter turnout. I won't get into some of the specific things because a lot of them have been mentioned, but one of the things that we discussed is that voters may not feel connected to the candidates because the candidates are not speaking on issues that are relevant to those voters. So how we combat that is we make sure that we are constantly putting the issues that are important to these constituencies in front of these candidates. And if that means we have to provide the forums where these candidates are forced to speak on these issues, that's something that we can do. We also talked about the fact that here in Ohio, it's not so much of people voting against their own interests. We had a nice side discussion on that. But if just 1 out of 5 of those people that stayed on the sidelines in the 2020 election that are identified as low income were to vote, and they voted in the same proportion as a general election, that would radically break the supermajority that we have in our state of one party and radically change the representatives that we have going to Washington. We also discussed the fact that both parties, and because we are the Poor People's Campaign, we are political, but we are nonpartisan, both parties have a certain amount have been captured by the corporate interest and the money interest. And therefore they demonstrate a lack of independence and tend to perpetuate false narratives that we know are not for the things that we are for. And I think that's that I'm going to stop there. I don't want to looking at things. As I said, I think yeah, help me out, Lou.
Yeah, and so for the long run, if possible, while we are educating
the legislator, we force the education to them, and we also put on education to general public as a voters, so they can vote wisely as well. The long-term solution is eventually we have to get our own candidates out. If Republicans and Democrat parties cannot have candidates, they can actually raise the voices of people, then eventually we want to have our own candidates to compete with them.
And thank you for bringing that up, Lou, because Monica Wilson came up with another mention. I'm sorry I didn't mention this. When we do know that there are candidates that are out there that speak our language, that represent our positions, it's also our responsibility to amplify that, to make sure everybody knows who these people are and to familiarize them with them, whether we live in that constituency or not, because that, again, gets to what Lou was just talking about. So I thank you. I think that's—
it's not local politics hurting us. It's also the state, especially the state in Ohio situation, and also the federal. And that's why we came up with that ideas as well.
I think we're done here. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Group 5, group number 6.
Hello, my name is Monica. I'll share our notes that I also typed into the chat so that they can be downloaded later. We started off kind of with the same point. It was, how do we get our foot in the door to hold people accountable to representing our issues and our needs. And then we spent a lot of time talking about the need for political education in general. Not everyone comes from a background where politics was part of the dinner conversation or part of the education system. And so there's a need for just politics 101, covering things like how important are the primaries, why the primaries are important, who is the precinct chair in your county, and how do you contact them? What are tenants' rights, and then even just educating people on the risks in their own homes, the environmental risks, and then ultimately educating ourselves about issues in our own neighborhood. So even within our group, we had different participants who were educating each of us in the group about mold, toxic mold in the home, or the need for honest education and these new House bills prohibiting divisive education. So just within our group, we had people who could educate each other. And then as far as getting people out to vote, we also talked about going to where people are, going to the grocery stores, going to the bus stops, things like that, and having a multitude of outlets. So it has to be more than just Zoom. So some things were brought up like YouTube, the possibility of a TikTok challenge, things like that, where it's not just one way of reaching out to people.
Excellent. Thank you. Good stuff. Good stuff. Thank you, everybody. I know your tri-chairs will be in touch with you to talk about things that our discussions have come from what you have just shared. So we're going to now throw this over to Julie. She's going to give a presentation on how people can get involved. Julie.
Thank you, Susan, so much. What great input today. What a great day today. I think this has been a fabulous meeting. Once again, thank you all for coming and sharing your day with us. We really appreciate it in this important time, especially. Anybody, if you'd like to get involved, if you're not already involved, you can follow us on our Ohio Poor People's Campaign Facebook page. You can also email us at ohio@poorpeoplescampaign.org. And we also have a Twitter account. You can follow us at Ohio PPC on Twitter. I believe we also have an Instagram page as well. I don't know how active that is now at this time, but we talked about that in our ideas, getting more involved on social media, that being something. So if there's somebody that would like to help us run our Instagram page or our Facebook page, please let us know.
Julie, you looked great on Facebook. Was that Instagram I was looking at? But you were great on there.
Thank you.
We're on YouTube. We're on YouTube also. So
yes, we do have a YouTube channel. Thank you, Gail, for reminding me. We don't have it on the slide, but we also have Ohio Poor People's Campaign YouTube channel as well. And we hope to, there's a few things we're working on, and we hope to have more uploaded there. We'd also like to do something about stories, everybody's stories being uploaded, different impacted folks and what their stories are. So we'd love you to check them out.
Yeah, Julie, the other thing that we have going on is the Wednesday meet and share. That
yes,
especially for new people, I would encourage them to come to that and ask questions and get to know other people. And that's a good way to start learning more about what's going on and how to engage with us in direct ways.
Yes, thank you, Colette. And we also have regional meetings. So we have a regional meeting in Southwest, we have a central regional meeting, and we have a Northeast regional meeting. And those happen once a month. And we send out notifications to let everybody know, and we'll send that information out in a follow-up email as well.
Thank you, Julie. One of the things that I want to say before Joan closes us out with the video is that using Instagram is real important. I learned from doing social media for another organization that millennials and people younger than millennials think that Facebook is for old people, but they really do. They don't really care about Facebook, but they use Instagram. And so if there is a person, or there are some persons, younger people who love doing that, and you can get some people to do some fabulous messaging on Instagram, we'll be able to reach some of the younger people that maybe we're not reaching. So
and TikTok is really big these days. Yeah.
Could I add a comment as well? We need to all thank the courts for holding the line on redistricting and returning the inappropriate maps for revision, and sending those back, and they're already coming back to them again, and hopefully they're still not good. So hopefully they will, but they've been just wonderful. The courts have been in Ohio so helpful. So I think we all need to thank them.
Good point. All right, Joan, it's back on you.
All right. Well, to close us out, my friends, I have another slide about joining the national campaign. You can do that through text or sign up online if you haven't already. And then I have another one of the videos from the Poor People's Campaign to share with you.
We are a new unsettling force. You say that?
We are a new unsettling force.
And we are powerful.
And we are powerful.
We are a new unsettling force.
We are a new unsettling force.
And we are here.
And we are here.
We are a new unsettling force.
We are a new unsettling force.
For liberation.
For liberation.
And we got nothing to lose.
And we got nothing to lose.
But our chains.
But our chains.
We are a new unsettling force, and we are powerful. A new unsettling force, and we're here. A new unsettling force.